Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. I want to welcome Kaplans and wish happy birthday to Hannah. And I want to thank Ethan for helping to lead our services. She had a lot of nachas. Did a very beautiful job. You know, this week's Torah reading, Parshas Shmini. Some of the kids here, what Parsha is it? Shmini. Very good. What do we learn about in Shmini? You don't remember? What about animals? Do we learn about animals in Shmini? Which animals are kosher? The Torah describes. So what are the signs of an animal being kosher? You remember?
If he has
split hooves and they chew their cud. Excellent. You see, they're learning something in Hebrew school. I remember I used to give tours of a farm, and we would show the kids what it means to split hooves and the chewing cud. You hear these words, but then when you see it in real life, it means something a little bit more. So we talk about kosher in the Torah reading. So there was once a fellow, his whole life he ate only kosher, but he had this strong desire. He wanted to try ham, so he didn't know what to do. He figured he went to a neighborhood, no one would recognize him. He's in a restaurant, and who does he see looking through the window? He sees his rabbi. So he said, "What are you doing?" So the rabbi says, "What are you doing?" He said, "Don't worry, you're watching me, so it's under rabbinical supervision." The same guy, he realized he got caught, so he ran away. He went to Hawaii, because he figured there, they make the big spit with the luau's and everything. They have the big, so with the pig with the apple in its mouth. And who should he see there in Hawaii? His rabbi was there too, walking by. So he said, "What are you doing again?" What they do, I don't know. But really, this is a very special Shabbos. It's our first Shabbos after Passover. Passover is such a beautiful and deep holiday. We're going to talk a little bit more about that as well. But we read in our Torah reading about the different types of animals, which animals are kosher, are clean, which ones are not. And it starts out in Leviticus chapter 11. It says the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, said, "Speak to the children of Israel," how you doing? In order to say to them. So we have a general rule in the Bible that there are no extra words anywhere in the Bible. So if it says God spoke to Moses and Aaron, say, "Speak unto the children of Israel in order to say to them, this is the animal which is clean, this is the animal which is not clean," and so forth. Why would it start like that? Why do you have to have those additional words in order to say to them? We're already talking to them. Why are you talking to them in order to say to them? What does that mean? So, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Bardichev is a town in Ukraine. The holy Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Bardichev, we always said he was a defense attorney for our people before God. He was always defending us, no matter what. If he saw something bad, he always tried to see something good in it. There's a passage in the Talmud that says when a person repents out of love, all of his sins are turned into mitzvahs. So he saw a fellow in his neighborhood who wasn't known to be so pious before Yom Kippur, and he said, "I'm very jealous of you because all of your sins that you did all year, you love God really in your heart, and you're going to repent on Yom Kippur. They're all going to turn into mitzvahs. I'm so jealous of you." So then the fellow told the Rebbe, he said, "Don't worry, next year you'll have more to be jealous of me for. You don't have to worry." But so he said that this passage there where it says, based on various parts of the Bible, he said, when it says, in order to say to them, there's really a message there. What does it say? What is it meaning? He said that in the book of Joel is one of the shortest books of the Bible, and probably one of the shortest chapters of the Bible. It's not the shortest book, because Obadiah is only one chapter, but Joel is 4 chapters. In the third chapter, a pretty short chapter too. And there, in the third chapter of Joel, it starts out that with a prophecy for the end times, that your sons and daughters will be prophets. Young men and old men will see visions. And, there will be an outpouring of prophecy. Doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter where you came from. Even it seems to indicate there, it doesn't matter if you're Jewish or not. Whatever it is, everybody will have that opportunity if they work on it to all be prophets. Every little kid here, every old person, everyone what it says, young and old will see visions, will all be worthy to be prophets in the end times when the Messiah comes. That's the vision that Joel brings out. Now we have a tradition. It says in Nachmanides, he was a medieval commentator to the Bible and to Talmud and so forth, and he writes, why did the Torah say these animals are kosher, these animals are not? If you look at the kosher animals and the kosher birds and so forth, they generally tend to be docile, kind animals. They're generally herbivorous animals for sure. All the mammals we eat are herbivores. The birds we don't eat birds of prey, and they're kind animals. And the world says you are what you eat. And so therefore, if we eat kind, gentle animals, it'll make us kind and gentle. There's a passage also in the Midrash that says, it says in Exodus that Moses, when he was a baby, they actually went, it says in the book of Exodus in the Bible, that Moses, Pharaoh's daughter, went and got Moses' own mother to nurse him. So Midrash says that because that the mouth through which the divine presence is going to speak cannot derive its nourishment from an unclean source. And so even as a little baby, and even before the Torah was given, he had to nurse from his own mother, not from someone who wasn't foreign, to have a different nursemaid. And so therefore, that's the idea behind what does it mean. These are the animals that speak unto the children of Israel in order to say to them, these are the animals. That's the idea behind keeping kosher. Is it's in order to say to them, in order to be able to talk to them, that this is the way, that through being careful, having this diet, one of the aspects that's behind it is it's getting ready for prophecy. We're looking forward to that time in the future when God is going to talk to us. And so therefore, in order to be worthy for that, one of the necessities to that is the kosher diet. Now, that's what the Kedushas lady writes there, the Berditchev Rav. Now, I don't know about you all, but I know I myself, I grew up not always eating kosher. So, it's not my fault. I wasn't raised with this. So what hope do I have when the Messiah comes? Will I be, we read later in the book of Numbers that there was some people who weren't able to bring the Passover sacrifice. And they came to Moses saying, why should we be left out? And so I could ask the same thing, why should I be left out? Just because it's how I was raised. I didn't know any better. Moses, even as a little baby. So what's the answer? Now this is a very special Sabbath. The Sabbath after Passover, there are all kinds of customs in different communities, what to do with the challahs. Some people in some communities, particularly the Eastern European communities, of course they've come to America and Israel and other places in the world as well, have a tradition to, when they bake the challah, to stick a key in it, or to make the challah in the shape of a key and so forth, and different things like that. And the idea is that that's the key to prosperity. It's the key to a lot of things. A friend of mine, a rabbi who lives in a few towns over, next town over, Rabbi Rosenbaum, he said to me once, he said that, there's a custom every Friday to sharpen the knife that you're going to cut the challah with. Why? Because that's the key to everything. Everything, what we do down in the synagogue is very important, but what's more important is what we bring home from the synagogue. What we bring home and go and we have a Sabbath meal together with the family, we make a kiddush and eat the challah. That's the key to everything. But it's more than that. Not only is the key to material prosperity, according to many traditions in the Kabbalah and so forth, but it's the key to something else. It says in our liturgy that there are 3 meals that are supposed to be eaten on the Sabbath, and during the third Sabbath meal, there's certain traditions to have the following liturgy that says in the merit of these 3 meals that we ate this Sabbath, we should fix whatever we did all week by eating something not kosher. That through celebrating the Shabbat, through Oneg Shabbat, through that celebration, through lifting up our life, the things that seem to be material and base, really to be lifted up into holiness, really that act of eating is transformed into a meditation, into a way to commune with God. That's why our Christian neighbors, they have an idea of eating a communion. It's not It's not really foreign, even though we don't believe the way that they do that we're eating God, but everything is made. God made everything, and everything is God. God is everywhere. So every act of eating can be an act of communion with God. And so therefore also it's an act of rectification, of coming back and returning to God. And one of the things that it fixes is that. So therefore, if eating on the Sabbath fixes eating not kosher during the week, that means, and eating kosher is a preparation for prophecy in the end times when the Messiah comes, that means that when we eat, we're going to go eat tonight the cake and the challah and the soda and everything else and the wine and the grape juice. When we're doing that, we're actually preparing. We're making that investment for the end times when God is going to talk to us, when we're all going to be prophets, each and every one of us. It's a very powerful message, and it's a very powerful and exciting thing that we're going to accomplish now tonight and tomorrow when we eat in honor of the Sabbath. Whatever we eat, we say, this is Oneg Shabbat, this is the enjoyment of the Shabbat, where it says in the Bible, V'karata l'Shabbat Oneg, you're supposed to call the Sabbath a delight. It's supposed to be fun and enjoyable and exciting, and that's a very important aspect of that we're actually, really, since God is eternal and there's no time or space, when we're eating, it's even if we don't hear God talking to us while we eat the Sabbath food, it is an act of prophecy because God transcends time, and so everything that was and is and will be, God already knows. So we're actually not only putting an investment for the future, we're actually having a prophetic experience in a certain sense when we eat that food, if we think about it and we meditate upon it. Now, if you start hearing voices, maybe be careful, but to recognize that service and that way of connecting to God through eating the Sabbath food, it's a very holy experience. Now, I mentioned we just ended Passover. When I was in college, I remember there was a man who was a Holocaust survivor from Poland who I became friendly with, and he passed away suddenly. I went to his funeral, and the following story was told at his funeral. And it's about Passover, and it's about eating. And I usually don't like to talk about the Holocaust, and I know some people observed this last week Yom HaShoah. It's not my personal custom to observe that for various reasons. It's still the month of Nisan, which is a happy month when we're not allowed to, say eulogies and so forth. So from a traditional perspective, how appropriate that is questionable. But still, this was a story I wanted to share on Passover. I forgot, and so recognizing that as well, there's that connection, and it shows how this man was a real hero. They picked that day because they thought certain people were heroes, but the thing was, those people didn't survive, who took things into their own hands, and this man who devoted his life in piety did survive, and lived to an old age, and had children and grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and lived a pious and successful, both financially successful and spiritually successful life in Queens, New York. And I just remember this Mr. Engel, and they told the following story. He was in camps, and he was a teenager, maybe 14, 15, 16 years old, and it came Passover. Now you could imagine, Passover, such a holy time, and we don't eat chametz, we don't eat anything leavened, and he decided, even though it was life or death situation, really he probably could have just eaten whatever they had, but he wanted to try as long as he could not to eat anything that wasn't kosher for Passover. And that's what he did. And he made it the whole week, and then it was already the last night of Passover, and he fainted. And they found some little piece of bread or something, some crumb, some scraps, and they waved it in front of his face to try to wake him up. And he woke up, and then he realized, wait a second, this is a holiday. Before you're allowed to eat on Shabbat or the holiday, you have to make Kiddush. And the holiday Kiddush, we don't say every week, we say it a few times a year on the holidays. And even though he was maybe 15 years old, and he hadn't, he probably hadn't said that holiday Kiddush too many times, somehow he knew it. He had it. He didn't have a siddur in front of him. He had it memorized. And the fact is, if you don't have wine or grape juice on a Friday night or the holiday night Kiddush. You can say it on the challah or a matzah or a piece of bread, even if you don't have a whole thing. Whatever you have, you can say it on that. In the daytime Kiddush, you could say on a different drink. You could say on beer or soda. You can't because it's mostly water, but juice and things like that you could say it on. Havdalah also you could say on juice or beer or something if you don't have grape juice or wine. But the Friday night and the holiday night has to be, if it's not on grape juice or wine, it has to be on bread. That's the halacha. So he took that little piece of chametz that they gave him, and he made the bracha, amotzi lechem min haaretz, and then he made the blessing for the holiday Kiddush, Mekadesh Yisrael Bazmanim, but it's longer than that, it's a whole long blessing. And then he thought to himself, on Passover, the first days, we say Shechianu, but the last days we don't. But he didn't say it the first days because he didn't have anything what to say it on. So should he say Shechianu or not? And can you imagine, after not eating for a week, and all the horrors and tortures that he experienced, and just fainting, he had and being a teenage boy, he had the frame of mind to recognize that he could say Shechianu, and not only that, to say Shechianu, that he could be thankful that God gave him life, and was able, Shechianu, v'kimanu, v'giyanu, was manazeh, that he gave him life and sustenance that he should continue to live to that day. To me, that's a real hero. To find that type of experience in the darkness of the torturous life that he was living, and that faith is what gave him the power to survive and come to America and live a life which he balanced both. As I said, he had the best of all the worlds, and they said there, I remember at his funeral, you could be sure that he had a great reward waiting for him after living that kind of life. And I would say, even at that point, he was eating something that was chametz on Passover. But I would say that act of eating was also one of those prophetic acts, one of those holy and sacred acts, because sometimes, even if it's not the right way, but if your heart is in the right place, no matter what you do, ultimately, you could still be having that connection to God. And the fact was, at that time, of course, he was perfectly legitimate to do it for many reasons. First of all, even regular Passover, he could have eaten because it was life or death. And at that point, it was already the 8th day, which is already something additional beyond the Torah requirement. It's a rabbinical law that the 8th day. In Israel, they don't observe it. So that was the way that he had that experience. And so, on this day when the gates are open, when we have the keys given into our hands, to celebrate all the prosperity and the gifts that we had, let's think about let's think about that type of life, to overcome that, to really be a hero, and when we have our challenges in our life, to find strength to overcome, and to also be, in our own ways, heroes like that. Those are the keys that God has given us. And so, and on the Shabbos of the keys, the Shlisel Chal Shabbos, where let's open all those gates, and let's hope that God opens up the gates for all of our prayers, and we should only see good things and happiness, and be able to have nachas from all our family and good things. Thank you very much, and all the best to you. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbos.